Today we're going to be learning how to put a 2D character in a 3D environment using visual effects inside of Blender. Like always, if you want to follow along with us, I have everything I use down below. Okay, so let's get started. The first thing that we need to do is go ahead and key out our footage. Of course, if you do want to put your own character or another character from a show that doesn't have a green screen, you can always rotoscope it out yourself, but we're just keeping it simple for this tutorial. So let's go to the compositing tab and then hit use nodes. We don't need this render layers node, so I'm going to go ahead and delete that, and then Shift A, add a movie clip node. And then we want to locate where we have our green screen footage. Okay, so here's the one I'm going to use. It's the same process for the others. So let's go ahead and open the clip. And then we can go ahead and make sure we have the Node Wrangler add-on installed. So just type in Node Wrangler and make sure that's installed. And then with that, we can hold Shift Control and then click the image socket. And now we're viewing it, and just hit V to kind of zoom out. Let's go to a frame where we can actually see our character. So right there, we can go ahead and add a keying node like so. Put that in between the viewer and the movie clip. And we can go ahead and come down here. We want to pick select the green color, and that's automatically done a pretty good job. There's a little bit of jankiness with the edges. Let's go ahead and view the matte node, and you'll see that SpongeBob actually has like some gray values in there, and the grayer, and we want to get that out because that's actually going to be rendered as slightly transparent. So I'm just going to play around with the clip white and the clip black to kind of solo out just his silhouette right there. So that's looking pretty good. Let's actually come back out to the images, and what I like to do just to get kind of some of these janky bits, just because of the green screen, the person probably just rotoscoped it out themselves. I'm going to go ahead and just dilate it just a little bit to bring those edges in, maybe around a -3. That looks pretty good. So the final thing that we need to do is just plug the image into the image of our composite. And then if we come over to the output section, we just want to go ahead and make sure it's on PNG, the RGBA is turned on, and then the compression down to 0. A is very important because it's the alpha channel and is what is going to be used for the transparency of our actual cartoon character. The final thing that we have to make sure is go to render and then go down to color management and set it from filmic to standard, just so we have the right color space. And then let's go ahead and render the animation. Okay, so once you have the rendered animation, we need to go ahead and motion track our footage. So in a new project, let's go up to the plus VFX motion tracking and then open up the footage. I went ahead and converted the video into a image sequence just so it's easier to work with. So I'm going to hit A to select all these and open up the clip. Again, we need to set the scene frames, prefetch our footage, come up here to color management and set it to standard again. And then let's go ahead and bring some of these windows down just so we can see our work area a little bit better. Now I will say that this isn't really a in-depth camera tracking tutorial. I actually do have one of those if you are interested. Link is up in the top right corner. Let's go ahead and set up some settings. I'm going to set match to previous frame. I'm going to hit normalize, and then in the tracking settings extra, let's just put the correlation to a 0.9. And now we can go ahead and let Blender detect some features. Let's go into the menu, set the threshold down to a 0.1, and then a distance of an 80. And then we can just hold Control and hit T, and those will track forward. Now let's bring our graph up down here. You'll notice that some of the points actually go a little haywire, so we're just going to delete some of those, some of the spiky bits here and there. Then let's kind of do a more visual pass up here. Let's scroll throughout our clip, and you just want to select any points that kind of move around. You'll notice if I zoom in here, these 2 points are kind of stuck on these moving particles down here. So I just want to go ahead and find all of those and delete them. Okay, so once you're happy with that, let's go and get a camera solve. So I'm going to go to the solve section. The A and B keyframe are actually fine since that's where I want the most parallax, and at the beginning of our footage is where we move the camera the most. And then let's just go ahead and refine everything and solve the camera motion. Okay, so we got a solve error of a 0.51, which is actually pretty decent, but I want to try to get that as low as possible. So I'm going to go ahead and clean it up, clean tracks, and then let's just make this reprojection error up. And so the idea is that we're basically just selecting the highest reprojection error tracks, and then we're just going to go ahead and delete those. And if we solve the camera motion again, we should get a lower solve error of a 0.21. That's actually perfectly fine for what we are going to be needing this for. So hopefully you got a similar result. Okay, so let's go ahead and set up our scene. So let's pull this down now, and then right click, just join the areas so we can see this a little bit better. Let's scroll down, go to set up the background, and then set up the tracking scene. And that's set up some few things over here we'll deal with in a little bit. For now, we need to actually define where our floor plane is going to be. So I'm going to select 3 points on the floor. It can be really any 3 points, and then hit the floor button over here. and you can't see anything, and that's actually because the cube is way in the distance there. So what we need to do is go ahead and set the scale. So I'm going to select these two kind of points, and we can tell that it's roughly about like 1.5 meters from each other, give or take. I didn't shoot this footage, so I actually didn't take measurements, but that's definitely something that you might want to look into if you shoot your own footage. Let's go ahead and set the scene scale, and then change this number instead of a 1 to a 1.5. So that roughly matches kind of, you know, the right scale for the scene. And then let's go ahead and select this point. I'm going to set that as our origin, and then this point I can set as our x-axis. Okay, so now let's come up here and just make sure our track worked. So I'm going to hide the cube, and then if we just scale our kind of plane down, I want a G and then X to move it on the x-axis, and you can see that's roughly following the floor. It loses it a little bit over here, but since we're not going to be putting any background characters kind of way in the background there. Okay, so now that we have our scene tracked, let's come back out to the layout tab, and let's set up some settings inside of Blender that I don't really like that it automatically sets up. So I'm going to go delete the background and foreground collection. I don't really like those. And then the background view layer, we can go ahead and exit out of that. And then in the compositing section, let's just go ahead and delete these 4 nodes. We're just deleting all these because it's what Blender automatically set up with us setting up a tracking scene, but we're not going to need them for this tutorial. So there's that. Now let's come back out to the layout tab. Let's Alt-H to unhide everything. I'm not going to be using the cube for this scene, so let's select the cube and then the light up here, and then just delete those. Now we're stuck with this plane. Let's go ahead and kind of slightly model out our scene. So I'm going to Shift-Z to align that. I basically am looking at the point right here, and I want to align that point kind of where it meets the pillar corner right there. So roughly around there. It doesn't have to be perfectly exact. We can always mess around with it later. Then let's kind of model out this scene. So I'm going to go to tab to edit mode. Let's actually go ahead and enable some shortcuts down here for you guys. Okay, so let's go into the edge mode. Going to select this edge right here, E to extrude, and then in the Y direction, and just, again, I'm trying to look at the corner here and just meet it where it meets the corner, then E, Y again, and we just want to move that out there. Then let's go ahead and do it in the opposite direction now. So I'm going to go ahead and select these 3 kind of edges there, E and then X this time to move it in the X direction. We don't need to go that far, probably around like right there. Looks good. Then let's go ahead and get this kind of edge all the way to the wall. So G and then X, or sorry, Y to move it all the way to the wall. I'm actually going to move this out just a little bit further, somewhere there. You can see that it's not exactly lining up exactly where we want it. So for that, I'm just going to select this little vertice here and kind of move that there. And then we can go ahead and select this vertice and move it right there. So now we kind of have our wall defined. Let's go ahead and extrude the wall up. So I'm going to select that edge and then E, Z, just move that up. Again, I don't really care about the connections here as long as kind of that edge is good down there, since that's where I want to put a character. That's all I really need. So let's go ahead and come back out. We want to go ahead and set up some render settings since everything is kind of gray right now. So let's go over to the render properties, go change our render engine to cycles, then GPU compute. These are just some of the render settings I like to use. A sample count for the viewport, I like to turn down and then turn the denoise on. And then for the sample count of the render, I like to turn it to like a 126 for now, and then turn denoise off. We can always denoise it later. So now you'll notice that everything is still gray, and that's actually because we don't have lighting in our scene, and we also don't have any textures for our scene. Okay, so in order to actually see our footage again, let's come up to the render properties and then go back down to film and hit transparent. And now we can see our background footage. What I do like to do is come up to the camera properties, camera settings, and then for the background images, I like to have the opacity all the way up just so it kind of mimics what I'm going to be working in. So all the way up like that. And then I want to go ahead and hit the render undistorted just because this is what Blender basically tries to render out of the motion track, but I don't like that. So I just kind of disable that since we're going to be compositing up here anyways. And with doing that, that actually moves where the pillar is. So I'm going to come back over here. Let's go to edge select and alt click that and then hold shift and then alt click that so we can get these two. And then if you type G and then Y, we can move it in the Y direction. So right there. And what we also need to do is go ahead and define where the pillar is over here. So I'm going to go ahead and hit Control R to add a loop cut. And then I'm just going to kind of move that on the other side of where our pillar would be. And then we can go ahead and hit 3 to select this face. And I want to hit E and extrude that upwards like that. And then what we can do is just, I want to select this kind of corner because you'll notice that there's kind of like an angle to this. I want to go ahead and just kind of G and then move it in the Y-axis and kind of just line it up a little bit nicer to that edge. It's not really following this edge, so let's go ahead and select that. And then G, Y again. And just kind of roughly kind of match it to the edge of this pillar. Okay, so now we are finally ready to start adding in our cartoon characters. So let's go ahead and we want to go ahead and have an easy way to import that in. And what I find is if you come up here to edit preferences, there's a hidden add-on called the import images as planes add-on. I don't know why it's not default by this point. We've been saying that for years, but you just want to make sure that's enabled. It comes default with Blender. Let's exit out of that, and then you can either hit Shift A and go to image down here, and we want to do a image as planes. And then what we can do is just locate the image sequence. Okay, so here is the keyed image sequence that we rendered out of Blender before. I'm just going to hit A to select all those. Before we go ahead and import them in, I do want to animate the image sequences. And then we can go ahead and hit import images as planes. And then you'll see that it's basically created a new object inside of Blender. And this is our keyed kind of, SpongeBob pass. Of course, you can import in all your different elements, but for this specific tutorial, I'm just going to deal with this specific one. Okay, you can go ahead and position him roughly wherever you want him to be. The first thing I'll notice is that if you didn't get a great key like I did, this shouldn't really be something you have to fix if you did it correctly. But if this does kind of happen to you, what you want to do, let's go ahead and pull out a new tab over here and go into the shading editor. Then if we zoom in, this is kind of what the import images as planes add-on kind of automatically does. And we can see if I go to my alpha channel, there's a little bit of gray there. And so what I want to do, because I'm a dummy, again, you probably won't have to do this, but I want to add a color ramp and then just move the white kind of towards the black. So now if we view that, we can see that the gray is gone and it's fully white now. Okay, so now that we fixed that, let's go ahead and close that out. And you'll notice two things. We don't have any lighting in our scene, and we also don't have any shadows in our scene. So let's go ahead and try to fix that. So the first thing I want to do is kind of get some of this ambient color in our scene. So I'm going to come over to the world properties. I'm just going to pick select kind of a yellow color, so somewhere like around there. And you can see that's doing a little bit better of a job. You'll notice that SpongeBob is very like shiny, he has kind of like a shimmer to it. And we don't really want that. It's really up to you how you want it to look. So let's bring that tab back over here. Go to shading editor, and then we just want to make sure the specular is down, and then we'll even turn the roughness up so there's no kind of like shine to them. Let's just put this tab over here for now since we're going to be coming back to it constantly. So that's brought some color and some lighting in our scene. We're not getting interactive shadows, and so what I want to do, let's go ahead and hide SpongeBob real quick. I want to go ahead and add a point light, so down to light point. And then we want to basically try to match where the light is. And so what I'm going to do is roughly, if this light was to, follow down, it'd be right around this area. So I'm going to G-Shift-Z, move it there. And then I'm going to G-Z, move that up until we kind of get it on that point light right there. Let's bring SpongeBob back, so Alt-H to unhide him. And now you can see that we're having a shadow in our scene. Again, by default, the ground object that it creates a shadow object. So if we go to visibility down here, you'll see it's set to a shadow catcher. And so that's exactly what we want. And so now what I want to do is basically place his feet on the floor. So like that. Just so we can have some more accurate shadows in our scene. You can see that he is basically stepping on the floor. What is very important to know is that it's not perfectly straight right there. And so what we actually want to do is go ahead and make that perfectly straight. And so in kind of workaround way I found to do it is if we come out here to the side view, what I want to do is I want to go ahead and come hit T up there and then go to the annotate tool. And I want to basically go on our floor plane. So right here, go ahead and click, and then if you hold control, it actually makes it a straight line. And I basically want to draw where the ground plane is. So right there is our ground plane. So now if I kind of drag throughout my footage, you'll see that he basically starts a little bit up here, and then he walks down kind of on that plane and stuff. And so what I actually want to do is have him kind of be on that plane at all times. So what I'm going to do is get him walking like that. I want to take this plane and kind of rotate that just until he's kind of flat on that ground. So let's move him down a little bit and just rotate him a little bit more. Something like that. And then just kind of play. You'll see that I did a little too much. So let's rotate it again like that. And then there, if you'll notice, we want to try to get his feet kind of on that line as much as possible. So there we go. Just by rotating it, now he's kind of walking exactly on that line. We can go ahead and go back to the annotation and just, delete that note up here and then come there. And so now we have, kind of good shadows on our scene with him. Okay, so that's pretty much the basic workflow. Let's play around with our lighting. So I'm going to come up here, go to our point light, and then I just want to play around with the radius a little bit. I'm trying to mimic some of these shadows. Like if you look over here, some of these shadows as closely as possible. So the radius just kind of diffuses it a little bit, something like that. And then we can even mess around with the power, with how dark it is. Now, with my actual scene, I took it into Nuke to composite and everything. Of course, I'm trying to stick inside of Blender as much as possible for this tutorial. And the nice thing about this workflow is this almost kind of represents the compositing section, because whatever is inside of this is actually going to be what we render out of Blender, which is going to be really nice, and we don't have to mess with compositing at all. So let's take a look at what we have so far. We just kind of play the animation. You can see that he basically walks out into frame, and then he's motion tracked, and we have the correct shadows and everything. It's looking pretty cool. So now what we can do is we'll notice that he kind of, there's a seam here, and so I'm going to try to hide that. There is kind of like this wall right here, and so I'm going to move him kind of like right here so he kind of walks in a frame there. And what I actually want to do is go ahead and set up a holdout section to actually block him, because right now he's kind of appearing on top of the wall. So instead of doing a mask like you would normally do inside of any other compositing program, I want to go ahead and add a holdout. So let's go ahead and select the camera. I just want to make it a little bit easier to see kind of where it's protruding from. So this is where our camera is, that little dot. So I want to go ahead and add a mesh plane, and I'm just going to rotate that on the X 90 degrees and then put that there. We can also scale it down a little bit, and what I'm trying to do is I'm basically just trying to position it where the actual wall would be in real life, and so it would be very close to the camera. So let's come to the top view. I'm even going to place it maybe right there, just because in the real world he would probably be that close to the actual wall. Let's just move that up a little bit. Maybe double tap X and then move it over there, and then GZ up like that. So now we can't see SpongeBob anymore, but of course we can still see this thing. So what I want to do is I want to come to the object properties, visibility, and instead of shadow catcher, we can set it to be a holdout, and that'll basically keep it from rendering it back there. It's a very solid line right there, and so let's actually go ahead and match the depth of field of our camera. So to do that, I'm going to go ahead and add a empty plane axis, and we can tell that the focus is roughly around this area back there. There's not really a in focus part of this image. It's all kind of blurry, so I'm just gonna kind of G Shift Z and then position it kind of somewhere back there. Now that I have that, I can go up to the camera and go down to the camera properties, and then we want to check depth of field. I want to select that empty I just made. So select that, and now you can see it's very kind of blurry and out of focus in here. Let's actually kind of view SpongeBob. He's also kind of out of focus and stuff, and this is where you want to match it to your actual camera. He's way too out of focus right now for me, so I'm going to set the f-stop up to, I believe, an 8 is kind of where it roughly matches, because you can kind of zoom down here and see it's very blurry. It kind of matches right there, and 8 is kind of a normal f-stop you would use in a camera. And so now what that's done is it's also kind of blurred out our holdout texture. So if we come over here, we'll notice that he's now, kind of more hazy and stuff. So let's select that holdout. I kind of want to dial it in, so G, double tap X, and just move that over until we kind of get a good, position for it to be. So right there is looking pretty good. You can, of course, play around with it yourself. And so, yeah, so that is pretty much it. We have this result. If you, for whatever reason, want to play around with the colors or anything, instead of doing it, again, in compositing, since that's going to mess around with the entire, image and everything, what you could actually do is come into the, image section. We're going to bring this back out here. And then you can do that to the color. So say I want to mess around with the saturation. So I'll place a hue saturation node in there, and this is where I can actually affect kind of, how he looks. So, say I want to brighten him up a little bit. I'll add a brightness and contrast node. I can plug that in there into the color and then into the base color. and then I can play around with the brightness right there. And so that's where you can really get into the nitty gritty and start to play around with how the actual characters look. Again, when I was doing my actual shot, I actually went ahead and rendered out the different passes into Nuke, and then used that to composite, since I like Nuke better than Blender. So if you guys are interested in that, please leave a like and comment, just so I can maybe think about doing that in the future. But yeah, so here is the actual shot I did. I went ahead and did the same exact process I did with SpongeBob and added in a couple more characters in our scene. You can see that Johnny Bravo back here is more close to where it's in focus. And so he's more in focus than anybody, and these guys are more out of focus. So you just want to play around with that. You can see I have the point light up here. And the cool thing is I actually, you know, since we modeled out the pillar to kind of be a shadow catcher object, I actually placed another kind of light over here where another light would be, and so we actually have Homer, his shadow over here casting onto the pillar, and same thing with Johnny back there. We have another light over there, so we can just get really cool results into this and play around with it. I think I even like went into Johnny's thing, and then yeah, I added some brightness and contrast because for some reason his shirt was clipping, like it was giving me no data at all. And to actually check that, you can come over here to render and go down to the color management, and instead of standard, let's put false color. And so now you can see that we can see kind of the low values and stuff. And so you want to make sure you don't have like any areas, let's mute this or whatever, that's like heavy purple and stuff. You'll notice that there's some black and purple sections or whatever, and that's basically where we're losing a ton of data. So if we come up back out the standard, you'll notice that he's super black back here, and depending on the look that you're trying to go for, you can totally do that. But I was trying to match it to kind of like the black levels over here, and so that's why I added this brightness and contrast node. And so the final thing that we want to do as soon as you're happy with adding all your characters and everything is, of course, we want to render out the final result. And like I said before, this is going to be basically the look that we're going for is going to be in the viewport. We're not going to be touching anything in compositing. The only thing you want to make sure is that your final kind of alpha over is into your composite node. And so with that, what we can do is come back out to layout. Let's just turn off the rendered mode since it'll help our render speed increase. And then we can come over here to the output section. Depending on how fast it renders, I went ahead and just rendered as a FFmpeg video. But if it's going to render out a while for you, I highly recommend you render out as a PNG sequence. So let's come over here. Just show you some of my settings. I like doing FFmpeg video to render out as a video, and then just setting it to be a QuickTime movie, and then setting the quality to be high quality. Those are the settings for MOV. If you want to do a PNG sequence, if it's going to be taking multiple hours to render, you want to go ahead and go to the PNG settings. We don't need alpha since we don't have any alpha in our scene. So what we want to do is go ahead and set these settings if you want PNG, and then we can just go ahead and render the final animation. Okay, so here is the final result that we got straight out of Blender. Like I said before, I actually took it into Nuke, so here's that version, and you can see that with Nuke, you can just do a ton more stuff and kind of get really into the nitty-gritty of how the shot looks. Anyways, it would mean a lot to me if you guys consider liking and subscribing, and I will see you in the next video.